why pruning matters. There is a simple joy in watching a tomato plant grow. It is a sign of summer, a warmth of delicious things to come. But to get the very best from your plants, a little intervention is needed. This is where pruning comes in. Think of it not as a chore, but as a conversation with your plant. You are guiding its energy, telling it where to focus its efforts. By making a few careful cuts, you can encourage the plant to produce larger, more flavorful fruits rather than a jungle of leaves. It is a small act that brings a great reward, transforming a good harvest into a truly magnificent one. Pruning does more than just promise bigger tomatoes. It is also one of the best things you can do for the health of your plant. When a tomato plant becomes too dense and overgrown, air can move freely through its leaves. This creates a damp, sheltered environment where fungal diseases like blight can thrive. By thinning out the foliage, you open up the plant to sunlight and air. This helps the leaves dry quickly after rain or morning dew, making it much harder for diseases to take hold. A well-pruned plant is a healthier, more resilient plant, ready to fight off problems and give you its best. The energy of a plant is a finite resource. It can either be spent on growing more leaves and stems, or it can be directed into producing and ripening fruit. Without pruning an indeterminate tomato plant, we try to do everything at once. It will grow taller, wider, and produce countless side shoots. The result is often a large, leafy plant with many small, slow-to-ripen tomatoes. Pruning channels that precious energy directly into the main stems and the developing fruit clusters. This focus means the plant can support larger, healthier tomatoes that ripen more quickly and evenly, which is precisely what every gardener hopes for. Before you pick up your secateurs, it is vital to know that you should only prune when the plant's foliage is completely dry. Pruning creates small wounds on the stems, and if the leaves are wet, it is the perfect entry point for waterborne disease to infect your plant. It is also crucial to use clean tools. I like to wipe the blades of my secateurs with a bit of rubbing alcohol or a disinfectant wipe between each plant. This simple step prevents the accidental spread of any unseen diseases from one plant to another, ensuring your entire tomato patch stays healthy and productive throughout the long growing season. Determinate versus indeterminate. To prune tomatoes correctly, you first need to understand what type you are growing. Tomato plants generally fall into two main categories, determinate and indeterminate. The difference between them is fundamental to their growth habit and therefore how you should care for them. Determinate tomatoes are often called bush varieties. They grow to a specific predetermined size, usually around 3 to 4 feet tall. They produce their flowers and fruit all at once over a short period of a few weeks, and then their production is largely finished for the season. This makes them excellent choice for container gardening or for gardeners who want a large harvest for canning or making sauce. On the other hand, we have the indeterminate varieties. These are the vining tomatoes that just keep growing and growing and growing. They will continue to produce new stems, leaves, and fruit all season long, right up until the first frost put a stop to their progress. These plants can easily reach heights of 6, 10, or even more feet if given the proper support. Varieties like Gardener's Delight, Alicante, and most heirloom and cherry tomatoes are indeterminate. Because of the vigorous, sprawling nature, they are the ones that benefit most from a regular and structured pruning routine to keep them manageable and productive. It is quite important to identify which type you have. The plant label or seed packet is your best source of information. It will almost always state whether the variety is determinate or indeterminate. If you have lost the label, you can often tell by observing the plant growth. A determinate plant will look more like a compact bush and will develop flower clusters at the ends of its stems, which stops the stem from growing longer. An indeterminate plant will have a more sprawling, vine-like habit and will form its flower clusters along the sides of the stems. allowing them to continue growing upwards indefinitely. Understanding this key difference is everything when it comes to pruning. If you were to prune a determinate tomato plant in the same way you prune an indeterminate one, you would be cutting off the very branches that are destined to produce fruit. This would drastically reduce your harvest. For these burst types, a much lighter touch is required. Conversely, failing to prune an indeterminate variety will lead to a tangled, unmanageable mess that is prone to disease and produce a disappointing crop of small fruits. Knowing your plant is the first and most important step to a successful harvest. Become a large, fruit-bearing stem of its own, creating that tangled jungle we want to avoid. Removing them is the fundamental task of pruning these vining types. For the most common method, you will train your plant to a single leader. This is ideal for growing in tight space or when you want the largest possible tomatoes. To do this, you'll simply remove every single sucker you see. Start at the base of the plant and work your way up, checking each point where leaf branches meet the main stem. When the suckers are small, you can often just pin them off with your thumb and forefinger. If they have grown a bit thicker, it is best to use a clean, sharp pair of secateurs or snips to make a clean cut. Be vigilant, as new suckers will appear throughout the growing season. Another popular option is the pruning indeterminate tomatoes. Pruning indeterminate tomatoes is all about control and focus. The goal is to train the plant to grow on one or two main stems, known as leaders. This channels all the plant's energy into those stems, resulting in bigger and better fruit. The key is to remove the side shoots, which are commonly called suckers. These suckers are new stems that grow in the junction, or axil, between the main stem and the leaf branch. If left to grow, each sucker will uber leader method. This creates a more productive plant while still keeping it manageable. To do this, you allow the main stem to grow as usual, but you also select one strong, healthy sucker to grow into a second main stem. The best sucker to choose is usually the one that appears just below the first flower cluster, as it tends to be the most vigorous. Once you have chosen your second leader, you must remove all other suckers from both stems. You will then need to provide support for both of these main stems, training them up a trellis or cane in a V shape. As your indeterminate plant grows taller, it is also a good idea to remove the lower leaves. Once the plant is well established and has a few trusses of fruit forming, the leaves at the very bottom are no longer doing much work. In fact, they are often the first to show signs of disease as they are closest to the soil, where fungal spores can splash up during watering. Removing the bottom foot or so of leaves improves air circulation even further and makes it more difficult for diseases to get a foothold. It also makes it easier to water the base of the plant without wetting the foliage. A lighter touch for determinate plants. When it comes to determinate or bush tomatoes, the pruning philosophy is very different. Here, the rule is less is more. These plants are genetically programmed to grow to a certain size, set their fruit, and stop. Because their fruit develop on the ends of the branches, any heavy-handed pruning will simply remove your future harvest. The main structure of the plant should be left intact to allow it to produce its single concentrated crop. Therefore, the aggressive removal of suckers that is so essential for indeterminate varieties is not necessary, and in fact is counterproductive for determinate plants. However, a little bit of light pruning can still be beneficial. The primary goal for pruning determinate tomatoes is not to limit their size, but to improve air circulation within their dense, bushy structure. You can begin by removing any suckers that form below the first flower cluster. These low-growing shoots are unlikely to produce much fruit, and will mostly just create unnecessary leafy growth near the ground. Removing them helps to open up the base of the plant, allowing more air to flow through and reducing the risk of soil-borne diseases splashing onto the lower leaves. And after removing those very low suckers, the next step is to thin out some of the leaves. Look for any leaves that are touching the ground and snip them off. This provides a direct bridge for pests and diseases to climb onto your plant. Then, take a step back and look at the overall shape. If the plant seems exceptionally dense in the middle, you can selectively remove a few leaf branches from the center to open it up to more light and air. The key word here is selectively. You are not trying to change the plant's shape, but simply to allow a breeze to pass through it. Finally, remember that the foliage on a determinate plant provides important protection for the developing fruit. The leaves help to save the tomatoes from the intense summer sun, preventing a condition known as sun scald, where the skin of the fruit gets bleached and leathery. So, while you want to improve airflow, you must be careful not to remove too much of the leafy canopy. For determinate tomatoes, pruning is a delicate balancing act. A little tidying up at the base and a light thinning of the leaves is all that is needed to help these efficient plants produce their wonderful, timely harvest. Late season care and new beginnings. As the end of the growing season approaches, usually about a month before your first expected frost date, there is one final pruning task that can make a big difference. This is called topping the plant, and it is particularly useful for indeterminate varieties. Your plant will likely still be trying to produce new flowers and tiny fruit, but these latecomers have no realistic chance of ripening before the cold weather arrives. By snipping off the top growing tip of each main stem, you send a clear signal to the plant. Stop growing upwards and focus all remaining energy on ripening the fruit that is already on the vine. Interestingly, those suckers you have been diligently pinching off all summer do not have to go to waste. A healthy, vigorous sucker is essentially a perfect clone of the parent plant. You can easily use them to propagate new tomato plants for free. Simply take a sucker that is about 4 to 6 inches long and place it in a jar of water. Within a week or two, you will see small white roots beginning to form. Once the root system is about an inch long, you can pot it up in some compost. This is a wonderful way to get a later crop or to share your favorite varieties with friends. Gardening is as much an art as it is a science, and pruning is a perfect example of this. The guidelines provided here are a fantastic starting point, but do not be afraid to experiment a little. Perhaps you will find that a 3-liter system was best for your cherry tomatoes, or that a particular determinate variety in your garden benefits from a bit more thinning than another. Every garden had its own unique microclimate, and every gardener developed their own touch. Pay attention to your plants, observe how they respond, and adjust your approach accordingly. This is how we truly learn and grow as gardeners. Ultimately, the most important thing is to enjoy the process. There is a deep satisfaction in tending to your plants, in nurturing them from tiny seedlings into productive, fruit-laden specimens. The act of pruning connects you to the life cycle of the plant. It is a quiet, contemplative task that rewards your care and attention with a bounty of fresh, sun-ripened tomatoes. So, keep your tools clean, prune when the plants are dry, and take pleasure in cultivating not just a crop, but a deeper connection with your garden. The results, I promise you, will be delicious.